inside a brand new episode of Mountaineer Gameday Extra. Football is back this weekend for the Mountaineers. West Virginia with its toughest opponent yet, welcoming the Texas Longhorns this Saturday at 3:30. Both teams coming in 3-1 on the season. West Virginia's only lost to Missouri, and for Texas, the only loss there to LSU, a top 10 team. But Nick, of course, when you look at this Texas team, I know a lot of people are looking back at that game last year, that thrilling win in Austin for West Virginia, but of course, this is a completely different Mountaineer team than the one that traveled to Texas last season. And if you look over, especially defensively for the Longhorns, well, things look a little bit different as well due to some injuries and shuffling around. But the one thing that remains the same, one of the top quarterbacks in the league and really in the nation, Sam Ehlinger, right there for the Texas Longhorns. Talking to some people around the program earlier this week, they had said that he is somebody who has shown a lot of growth in the offseason, and he is looking better than ever coming off the Texas bye week into this matchup.
Yeah, this is one of the most productive offenses that West Virginia is going to face all season, and it's led by Ehlinger. Got a lot of dynamic targets to throw to. You're going to hear Duvernay is a guy that they're going to bring up a lot on the telecast this weekend, and not sure if too many people can really pronounce his name correctly. That was something that was a debate during Neil Brown's press conference this week, right? He's got a tough name, but
just start with D. We know what you mean.
But I think, West Virginia, too, I think you touched on this a minute ago, a lot of new faces in this matchup, particularly for WVU, of course, but really there's some elements of inexperience on both sides. And there's no doubt that this week is going to be West Virginia's toughest test of the season and perhaps the toughest test other than Oklahoma on the schedule this year for the Mountaineers. But the good thing going for West Virginia, sure, Texas is coming off its bye week, but West Virginia is too. And we talked to some of the players this week who all said that it's good to have this time, not just to refresh and maybe get away from football for a little bit, but to really have that extra week of time to prepare for the Longhorns, knowing that this is going to be a really tough test, knowing that Ehlinger is a whole lot like Kelly Bryant, a guy that for Mizzou that West Virginia had a really tough time slowing down. In fact, if you ask Vic Koenig, didn't really slow him down at all in that 38-7 loss back in week 2. But if you ask some of the veteran guys on the defense like Shea Campbell, Reese Donahue, those guys think that the defense is a lot better equipped to go up against a mobile dual threat type of quarterback like Ehlinger now than they were about a month ago earlier on in the season. But if you take a look at this matchup, from a fan perspective, Angelica, it's pretty clear that a lot of fans have been looking forward to this game, maybe because of the outcome of last year's game.
Well, I think, too, everybody's just all excited about horns down, right? I mean, since it happened, since everything had happened during Big 12 Media Days when they said there was going to be the penalty, it seems that horns down is now more in demand than ever.
Yeah, right.
And, of course, we know how guys at Texas feel about this and everything like that, but Coach Brown said it best that this is going to be a game that West Virginia needs the crowd behind it if it is going to be able to come away with an upset. So for Texas, obviously played in a lot of environments like this, but Coach Herman said while he does have some young guys defensively, the one thing that he was telling them was you might have been in a crowd that is loud like this, but you may never be in another environment that is as hostile as going to Morgantown, and we know how the fans are. Hopefully we'll see that on display. We've had some great crowds for the few home games that we've had here, so anxious to see how that really plays into effect coming up here this weekend. But talking about Sam Ehlinger, I mean, we're obviously going to be talking about him all week long, really the focal point there. If you look for Texas, they've got 2 1,000-yard rushers on the season. One is a sophomore, and one is Sam Ehlinger. So you talk about needing to be able to stop him in the run game. Coach Brown had said there is no stopping him. You just have to limit him. He is a guy that it's going to take almost everything you have to bring him to the ground. He doesn't get brought down often, and whenever it does, you see multiple hats on him there at a time. You also talk about Duvernay. He's the only player right now in the FBS that has multiple games, multiple 12-catch games too as well. So a lot of weapons there on the offensive side of the ball. And if you're this West Virginia team, you're hoping that, after the bye week, your offense can just keep continuing to grow. If there was a good time to go up against a Texas team, certainly now is the time with some inexperience that it does have defensively.
Right, and potentially some injuries in the secondary, some guys that are questionable to probable. While Texas has an incredibly good offense, Angelica is one of the worst teams in terms of stopping the pass in the Big 12. So it could be something that West Virginia could try to exploit. We're going to talk more about that later on in in MGD Xtra. But as for the fan perspective for this game, right, last year's finish was one for the ages. There's no doubt about that. But Neil Brown makes a really good point. While he wants there to be a raucous atmosphere, it's going to be a sellout crowd at Milan Puskar Stadium. He also noted that a lot of the guys that were a key part of that victory in Austin last season, well, they're no longer with West Virginia's program. It's a lot of guys who were veterans that maybe played a minor role in that win a season ago, but weren't the stars of that game. So because of that, he needs some players to step up this week in a major way, but also the Mountaineers really can't dwell in the past, even though they're coming off a big victory last season against Texas.
This is a big one because this is the one we play this week. They happen to be ranked number 11 in the country. West Virginia had a big win against them last year, but I don't think that'll have any bearing whatsoever when we line up and kick this thing off on Saturday.
Now, as always, an in-depth look at this matchup is coming up this weekend on a new edition of the Neil Brown Show. We'll take you inside the Encova Insurance Coaches Corner with Coach Brown to get his thoughts on his first matchup with Texas. That and much more coming up on the Neil Brown Show this weekend, so check your local listings for more details. But right now, let's get to know those Longhorns just a little bit better. Angelica had a chance earlier this week to catch up with somebody who covers the team.
We've got Chris Tavares from KXAN in Austin joining us now for a little more insight on the Longhorns. Chris, I want to start with Sam Ehlinger, the quarterback there for Texas. He's a guy that can get it done through the air and on the ground as well. In 10 of his last 17 games, he has passed and rushed for a touchdown. What is it about him and his skill set that makes him so productive in both the run and pass game?
You know, a lot of it has to do with the way he's built. He's a big guy, and he's really solidly built. A bunch of the comparisons, and, you know, when you first hear it, it might come off as lazy, but when you look at the style of play, a lot of people like to compare him to Tim Tebow, and he has the style of play that Tebow has, and he's also got the leadership that Tebow has. He's a really, really big leader in the locker room, and, you know, he takes the blame for any loss. He's a really, really great passer. He's grown a lot as a passer. I think his game against Oklahoma State, he looked totally different than I'd ever seen him look before, and I mean that in the best way possible. He looked like an elite level quarterback with the way he was throwing the ball, reading the defense, and just his presence in the pocket. But he's a guy that can run it really, really well too. And you hear a lot of people kind of compare him to, you know, he's a fullback playing quarterback, and that's a saying that he's not too fond of because he views himself as a thrower, as a passer, as a quarterback first, and a runner as a second option. And his style of play has changed to reflect that. He's not tucking the ball and running it too early anymore like he might have a little bit last year and way more when he was a true freshman, splitting time with Shane Buechele. But he's a really, really well-built guy who can throw the ball and can run you over if he gets in the open field. We saw it against Kansas State a couple of years ago. He's running for the end zone, and he just completely trucked a defender. So if he's running, he can make you feel it, but he can definitely beat you both on the ground and through the air.
One of his top targets this season, senior wide receiver Devin Duvernay. He's got close to 400 yards on the season. He's got 4 touchdowns, but the one thing that stands out to him when you look at the stat sheet is he has caught 12 passes on third down, and 10 of those have converted into first down. So, Chris, what is it about him that makes him such an impact player on this offense, and especially there on third down?
Duvernay has been a big surprise. I was talking to some people about him, and the best way I can describe him is he's been a revelation. And, you know, his freshman year when Shane Buechele was starting as a true freshman, Duvernay was kind of just this deep threat guy where he's got a ton of speed. So you throw it up and you tell him to get under it and catch it. This offseason they moved him from a wideout to the slot receiver to replace Lil Jordan Humphrey from last year. And he's just really, really thrived in that role. He's able to find the open pockets, find a spot in a soft spot in the defense to just get open. But he's the first receiver in Texas history to have 2 12-reception games in one season. And he's just come on so strong. Everybody knew that he was kind of in line for a big year. Everybody's focus was Colin Johnson, but what Duvernay's done this year has caught everybody by surprise.
on the other side of the ball for the defense. A little beat up right now in the secondary. How confident is Coach Herman in the depth there at those positions? And is it probable that we will see any of those guys that have been injured suiting up in Morgantown this weekend?
They lost a bunch of guys, a few guys. Jalen Green and Caden Stearns are two of the bigger names that come to mind that they lost in the secondary in the game against Oklahoma State. They had the bye week to try and get healthy, so the good news for Texas is they're getting a couple of guys back. It's a young secondary. They've been exposed a little bit, like they in the game against LSU. In LSU, they had 3 different receivers with over 120 yards. Herman is confident in the depth that they have in the secondary. It's the secondary and the receiving core are the 2 deepest positions for Texas. So they're confident that they've got depth to kind of overcome some of those injuries. They're getting some guys back after the bye. But, you know, they're young. They're led in the secondary by Brandon Jones, who's a senior, and he's a guy with NFL-type talent. He tested the NFL waters last year, so he's a guy that they're going to rely on. But they're pretty young at cornerback, and that's probably what I think is one of the weaker spots in that secondary.
All right, Chris, we appreciate the time. We look forward to seeing you this weekend in Morgantown as West Virginia hosts the Texas Longhorns. We will have plenty more on that matchup coming your way this weekend. Mountaineer Game Day returns on Saturday from 10 to noon, and we will be bringing you more on this matchup, a Stripe the Stadium game, a homecoming game there for West Virginia. Before we go off, Chris, there for just a second, one thing, Nick, and Sam, we've got Sam here with us now as well, that we had talked about special teams. I know for West Virginia, that's been something that Coach Brown has said has really contributed to some wins this season, something that they take a lot of pride in. If you look for Texas, they've had a 98-yard kickoff return earlier this year, but that came up against Rice. But if you look at the game against Oklahoma State, 2 occasions where special teams, one, led to a touchdown for OSU, and then potentially could have had the same thing factor in there, and that was only a 6-point win for Texas. So one thing as we talk about what we're looking forward to this weekend, to see how special teams really plays a factor in. Chris was saying from Coach Herman's media session that right now, if there was an area that he's not entirely confident in on this team, it comes in on special teams, and we'll see if West Virginia can have the advantage there.
You know what Neil Brown always says, take away special teams, the 2 things that win football games. So it's a good point and something to definitely keep an eye on throughout. But while Coach Herman might have some questions about his special teams unit, Sam's here because he's got your questions, and we're going to talk about them.
We've got a lot of questions this week. A lot of people thinking about the Texas game, obviously.
No kidding.
But to start off, we'll start with West Virginia. Yesterday, or Monday, I should say, they released the depth chart for this weekend's game. How are we looking in depth? We'll start with you, Nick.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who have been asking about backups, guys, what do we know about them? And one thing that's important to note is once the regular season starts, we don't get to see practices. Right. We do occasionally during fall camp and during spring ball, but during the regular season, no media access to practices. So we only know what the coaches are willing to tell us. But I think that the depth chart that was released earlier this week is a sign that maybe there was a lot of inexperience at the beginning of the year and there was a lot of doubt about that depth, but it appears that it's there now in a number of places, right? You've got guys like Winston Wright, who are now a starter, listed as a starter at one of the receiver positions. You've got a couple of guys who have really come into their own on the offensive line. I mean, we've talked about that so often so far through the first month of this season, and now guys like Bryson Mays is the perfect example, a guy who's climbed his way up the depth chart, who is starting center now. You've got James Gamitter, who I believe at left guard has surpassed Mike Brown. Maybe I have his side, right or left guard, but either way, there's a lot of guys, even on defense too, that have really come into their own so far this season. So while there's still a lot of experience and youth on this team, I think that a lot of the guys have really stepped up, and that's a good thing for West Virginia's depth to see some of these changes in the depth chart.
I mean, I think we really have seen, this depth for WVU, because if you look, you bring up Winston Wright, Ollie Jennings, Tyke Smith, Kerry Martin, some of those young guys, even Jordan Jefferson. Some of those guys that we have seen come in a starting role, we've also seen them in a backup role. So with so much change and shuffling happen now, it hasn't been any big areas that it has really had an impact, unless you're really looking at the offensive line, what they were able to do and change there. But I think that we have really already seen, I can't think of almost anybody else unless it would be injury related, like a guy like Drayshawn Miller or something. I don't know if there's anyone that we haven't really seen yet. Vandarius Cowan will be coming back this weekend. I mean, guys like
He's
that.
the only guy.
I don't think that there's anybody that we haven't seen yet that could, contribute and make an impact on this team. So I think that's a great sign. While you have to remember too, some of these guys may be freshman starters, but the guys backing them up may be freshmen as well. So there really is some young, inexperienced youth here on this team. But I think that we've seen that West Virginia does have plenty of, I shouldn't say plenty, but West Virginia does have depth to go around at certain positions. And we've seen some young guys step up and fill some roles this season. And hopefully that trend continues here through Big 12 play.
Especially with the loss of Josh Sills, we've seen that offensive line step up in the past couple of games. So, they've had a lot of surprises so far this season.
But this is the biggest test so far, and
Definitely.
a lot of these young guys, they're really, really going to be tested this week against Texas.
Oh, without a doubt. Speaking this weekend against Texas, what are you guys looking forward to? From Cheryl Jose. Sorry, from Facebook. I like that.
Yeah, well, good question. I think that this week, and talking to one of West Virginia's receivers, George Campbell, about this earlier as well, I think this week is really going to be a big test for West Virginia's receiving core and really see what Austin Kendall can do through the year. We heard after that Kansas game heading into the bye week that the deep pass is really something that the execution was just not there yet, something that they really wanted to see working on. And when you look at it, Sam James right now is West Virginia's leading receiver. He's got close to 300 yards, but the next guy is running back Kennedy McCoy there in the receiving game, who is the second leading receiver. So I would like to see some of these other guys step up in these positions. We talk about Winston Wright. We talk about Ollie Jennings. I think this is the time, like I alluded to earlier, a banged up secondary right now for the Longhorns. If West Virginia is going to figure out what it can do in the pass game, I think that this is a perfect opportunity for some of those guys to come on, some of those guys to step up, and to see if maybe we can get Austin Kendall to air things out a little bit more. Improvement there in the run game, but like Coach Brown said, and like we know, the run game is only going to get you so far in this league. You got to be able to throw the ball as well, and I think that we haven't seen yet what these wide receivers are capable of. The only one who has really shown his talent, shown some flashes, would really be Sam James there. So I'd like to see what West Virginia can do in the pass game. For me, I think if you can get things going in the pass game, that's a step closer to a victory this weekend.
It's a really good point, Angelica. It's something Neil Brown touched on in his weekly press conference. It was a focus during the bye week to try to work on finding a way to develop more of those explosive plays, especially against a Texas team that, after the first month of the season, is the worst at stopping the pass in the Big 12. So 7 plays of 20 yards or more is this team's record so far. They've got 14 on the season, but had 7 all in one game against NC State. Like to see them have that number or maybe even more if possible. But for me, the thing that I'm going to be looking at is West Virginia's defense. Can it contain Sam Ehlinger? Can it learn from the matchup against Kelly Bryant and use that as a blueprint to say, hey, look, we really struggled against Bryant. We had so many missed tackles and missed opportunities for sacks. What can we do better? How can we be better? How can we more aggressively attack or contain the quarterback so that we can give our offense a chance to go out and win this game? And then the other thing, too, is maybe we'll call it fan participation in this one. We know it's going to be a sellout, but this game definitely brings a different edge from Mountaineer fans. Although, Angelica, I don't mean to put you on the spot here. You did learn something this week about Texas and the whole horns down thing.
Right, I did. So Chris and I got to talking a little bit, and I was, from a Texas perspective, West Virginia coming in there, getting its first win in Austin in quite some time last year, and really on that last-second 2-point conversion by Will Greer. So I had asked, what's the vibe been like from the guys? I'm sure that they remember that matchup. Maybe they come here wanting to get some revenge on that, and immediately he had said the one thing that these guys remember from that matchup is really when the whole horns down epidemic has started, okay? So we remember it with David Sills and Gary Jennings, and then Oklahoma did it, and it kind of was something that caught on, and he said they remember that more. They take that, as a sign of disrespect. It's something that they really take personally. So they remember that more than they really are looking into the fact of how that they lost to that West Virginia team last year. So he said they're coming in here into Morgantown looking to get their revenge in that sense of hopefully they can, to the fan base, and the crowd and everything make it to where it's an environment to where there's really no need for the horns down because they're coming in here and showing why their horn should go up, I guess. But so that is something that we learned, which I kind of thought was interesting because Coach Brown talked about it on Tuesday, that somebody asked him about it and he said, are we still talking about this? Are we still talking about horns down? I know it's something, people like to do for fun. Fans like to do for fun. But I think, talking to him, he said it may seem silly, but that's something that these guys are really remembering whenever they come here this weekend. So I just have a feeling now that me saying this is going to give a lot more incentive for it to be happening this weekend here, that it's like, hey, but, we always like to hear, what other people coming into Morgantown. A lot of people have said this, one of the toughest places to play, and then all the drama back in, I believe, 2016. I believe it was Brecklin Hager there for Texas, coming in here to West Virginia. So a lot of storylines between these two teams really in the past couple years, but it's one that neither side really needs any more motivation.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right.
Talking to some of the guys on Tuesday, that they had said this has really become a rivalry in the sense that both of the fan bases kind of feel the same way. And not only are the players, dueling it out on the field, but they said the fan bases feel kind of rivaled, with each other as well, to see who can come up with the best atmosphere. And I mean, last year in Austin, that atmosphere was no joke. Now, I've got no doubt the Mountaineer Nation is going to show up and do the same thing this weekend.
Yeah, it is a sellout, and we said it earlier. Coach Brown wants it to be a loud crowd, make it a tough place to play.
And maybe who we'll see this weekend too. It's homecoming. Maybe we'll have some former guys
Very good point.
back on the sideline as well. So
I heard a rumor that Bobby Bowden might be in town.
Oh, really?
Because of the Peach Bowl team.
Right, that's
get,
right. Yeah.
Now, this game, it really is only the tip of the iceberg. They've got a gauntlet of an October coming up. Starts off Texas at home this Saturday. Then they host Iowa State the following Saturday. Then they travel to Norman to face Oklahoma. And then they travel again to Waco, Texas to face Baylor on Halloween. So that closes out the spooky season just perfectly. What's the outlook for October, do you think, guys?
Well, I mean, obviously, what you've said there enough is just the indication of how tough this month of October is really going to be. And without really giving, any type of prediction, here's the one thing that I think is going to be important in this West Virginia team. I think that's confidence that we have seen in the past with this West Virginia team, with plenty of teams across the nation. You go up against the Texas, the Oklahomas of the world, and then maybe after that, you take another loss, and now you start getting down on yourself. You're feeling a little bit of doubt, and then emotions kind of come into play, and things can kind of get messy there. I think that this West Virginia team knows what it has. It knows that it's inexperienced, but it knows that it has the talent there. So, is it going to take everything that it has to make it through that tough schedule? Absolutely. But isn't that part of the whole trust the climb?
Yeah, good point.
Isn't that what we're doing here? We are going up against these tough opponents, not shying away from them, and making sure that no matter what, try your best. Here's the one thing. I wouldn't even mind to see any type of loss if it was something that it was a hard-fought loss, not like the Missouri game. That's the type of stuff, but I know we're not all about moral victories or anything like that, but I think the way that this young team, a new head coach, I think if you can just go in there and show these opponents that you can play with them, there might be, an Iowa State and Oklahoma State team that you can catch up on with some momentum and maybe catch them at the right time in their season. So I think really for this one is confidence is key, and you just gotta #trust the climb. Coach Brown says he'll get you there and he'll take you to the potential of this team, and I'm looking forward to see what the potential is, especially up against those four opponents.
Particularly important to capitalize on these home games. Not that it's going to be easy by any means. Texas and Iowa State back to back, but the opportunity to win games at home or versus going to Norman or even to Baylor on Halloween on a Thursday night. Like, I get that Pat McAfee is going to be in the house, but these games are tough. And then not to mention in November, the Big 12 is competitive seemingly this year as it has been in recent memory, with Oklahoma State having a really tough run against Texas not too long ago, and I believe beating nationally ranked Kansas State team last week. So that's one that's still going to be out there in the distant future for WVU in November. But if you look at West Virginia, 3-1 right now, halfway to bowl eligibility, you got to have at least one of these games in the month of October. Maybe two would be really great. But in order to make it to a bowl game, that's really part of the recipe here. West Virginia has one of the toughest months of October of any team in a Power 5 conference. And if the Mountaineers can win at least one of these games, whether it's this one coming up against Texas or Iowa State or stealing one on the road, very important piece of the puzzle, I should say, for WVU in its quest for a bowl game.
Alrighty, that's it from me.
Well, wait, Sam, before we let you go, we gotta give a food shout out.
Oh, food shout out.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh, yes.
Some food
Oh,
here
yes.
again. Buffalo chicken burger, great. I know what you had looked really good.
Oh, yeah, the cheesesteak was fantastic.
Yeah.
We have to say thanks to the good folks at Varsity Club Catering Services for MGD Extra, provided, as always, by the Varsity Club Sports Tavern of Morgantown. So, Sam, tell them where they can find us on social media.
Follow us, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, at WV Illustrated. Be sure to head to our website, wvillustrated.com. We've got the latest on the Mountaineers. And next week we'll have another episode of MGD Extra, so please get in your questions with the hashtag AskMGDExtra. We're going to answer them right on the show, just like we did this week. So, thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Now let's do our weekly check-in with Dale Wolfley for his Hal of the Week.
So it's that time again for your MGD Extra, baby. And the Wolves, yeah, bring it. Oh, let's get at it, okay? Josh Norwood, senior, right? Against Kansas, he had 11 tackles, and they were solid, big tackles. I want to look at 2 plays from him from the Kansas game. He is third on the team with 21 tackles on the season. Of course, remember that he only played about a quarter of the NC State game. So again, he's making a big impact at safety, as this is the first time he's been playing this year. So if we take a look here at Josh here, he's got to come up and he is going to tackle. Now, I want you to see this. In the NC State game, you know, he hit helmet to helmet and he got ejected out of the game. Here's a great example of him going and doing something different here with his shoulder. Roll it. There we go. You're going to see the handoff here to Herbert. That's it. Roll it back. There you go, Scat. Roll it back, man. Here we go. Okay, good. Let's go slow-mo right now. Here we go. That's it. Keep it going. Keep it going. Coming up. Look at him hit. Stop it right there. Yes. Okay. He hits with his shoulder, not his head. Great job of learning your lesson, right? Here we go. Next play. So the second play here with Josh Norwood for this MGD Extra, we're going to show you Josh wrap up. There's only 11 seconds left in the game. This is a big, strong tackle, and that's what Josh really does, and that's what I'm trying to highlight here. You saw the play before. He came up and he hit with his shoulders because there was another Mountaineer who was wrapping up, so he delivered the big hit, right? But now he's going to stop this receiver who's doing a crossing route and drill him, and you're going to see him wrap. And this is what I want you kids to see as well. This is a great job by Josh. Let's go roll it, Scat, right here. That's it. Let's go. Passes off. Watch the defender coming across your route. There you go. Oh, roll that back slow-mo, and yeah. There we go. And stop right there. Okay, so Josh Norwood, all right, making some big-time plays for the Mountaineers. He moved from corner last year to safety this year, filling a big, big role and need for the Mountaineers. And that is your MGD Extra. Yeah, you know it's the Wolves. Let me hear it. Boom!
Wrapping up this week's edition of MGD Extra, don't forget that if you're watching us on WVIllustrated.com or on our Facebook page, there's now a new place you can find us. If you have Apple TV or Roku TV, make sure you search for WVU Athletics. That's where you can also find MGD Extra each week. And while you're online, make sure you follow us on social media. Find us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at WV Illustrated, and make sure to download the WV Illustrated app. That's where you'll find complete coverage throughout game week as we march closer to WVU versus Texas Saturday at 3:30.
We'll have you covered on that matchup coming up this weekend with a brand new episode of The Neil Brown Show and also Mountaineer Game Day. You can catch The Neil Brown Show on Friday night at 5 p.m. on AT&T Sportsnet and Saturday at 9 a.m. on your local Nexstar station. And then Mountaineer Game Day, Nick and I will be live from Milan Pushkar Stadium. Scott and Amanda will be right here at the desk as we get you ready for West Virginia versus Texas. Mountaineer Game Day begins at 10 a.m. So we thank you for joining us for another episode of Mountaineer Game Day Extra, and we hope you will join us again next week, same time, same place.